Welcome to a series that we call The End of Times, where we go through the book Revelation verse by verse to try our best to understand what it is we can expect to happen in the end times, or the times Jesus refers to as the end of the age. And we've been going through Revelation verse by verse. And where we are at the point now is John had been taken up to the throne room of God, where we're able to look around. He notices God has a scroll in his hand with 7 seals. And it is only Jesus Christ who is worthy to open those seals. And at this point, we are now on the 6th seal of these 7 seals. And we're just going to jump right in. So Revelation 6:12. I looked when he opened the 6th seal, and behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became like blood, and the stars of heaven fell to the earth as a fig tree drops its late figs when it is shaken by a mighty wind. Then the sky receded as a scroll when it is rolled up, and every mountain and island was moved out of its place. And the kings of the earth, the great men, the rich men, the commanders, the mighty men, every slave, every free man, hid themselves in the caves and in the rocks of the mountains, and said to the mountains and the rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of his wrath has come, and who is able to stand? So there's quite a bit going on in these 4 or 5 verses, and this particular event is brought up multiple times throughout Scripture, and it's brought up at least 4 times, I believe 5 times in Revelation alone. But one of the greatest places that we can go to kind of get an idea of what's happening during this during this time of tribulation is to go to Matthew 24, where Jesus speaks about it. And if we take a look at Matthew 24, verse 29, Jesus says, immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. So here Jesus is describing what's going to happen when the 6th seal is broken. Now, before we kind of go into more detail of what's taking place here, I want to say in advance that this 6th seal, Revelation 12 through 17, all of chapter 7 and chapter 8, 1 through 6, are all kind of happening at the same time. And this is what's taking place here is ultimately the end of tribulation. So again, if we go back to Matthew 24, immediately after the tribulation, those days the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of heaven will be shaken. So here we are, we're at the end of tribulation, but I just want to kind of talk about all these events are taking place at the same time. And we're going to talk about these particular events. Next week we're going to get into more of a timeline of when this happens. When does darkness fall on the earth, and how long will it take place, and what takes place in that time. But I just want to take this episode and talk about all these events that are kind of taking place simultaneously, and what is this event, because it's a very significant event. So significant that, again, it's brought up in Revelation multiple times, and it's brought up throughout the Bible multiple times. Isaiah saw this event. Daniel saw this event. So Jesus talked about this event. So let's just kind of go through this again real quick, and I'm going to jump through these chapters quickly to show you that kind of all this is happening at the same time. So let's read again chapter 6, 12 through 17. I looked when he opened the 6th seal, and behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became like blood, and the stars of heaven fell to the earth as a fig tree drops its late figs when it is shaken by a mighty wind. Then the sky receded as a scroll when it is rolled up, and every mountain and island was moved out of its place. And the kings of the earth, the great men, the rich men, the commanders, and the mighty men, every slave and every free man, hid themselves in the caves and in the rocks on the mountains. Said to the mountains and the rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of his wrath has come, and who is able to stand? Now let's jump ahead to 7. We're going to read verses 1 through 4. After these things I saw 4 angels standing on the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth, on the sea, or on any tree. Then I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God, And he cried with a loud voice to the four angels, to whom it was granted to harm the earth and the sea, saying, do not harm the earth, the sea, or the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our gods on their foreheads. So here we got this sixth seal breaking, but an angel saying, now hold on a second. We got to mark all these people. And then immediately when we jump into 7:9, so they're marking the 144,000 Jews, which we'll get to another time. And then immediately in 9 it says, after these things I looked, and behold, a great multitude, which no one could number, of all nations, tribes, peoples, and tongues, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes, with palm branches in their hands, and crying out with a loud voice, saying, salvation belongs to our God, who sits on the throne, and to the Lamb. And then let's jump to 7:14. So he said to me, these are the ones who come out of the great tribulation, and washed their robes, and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. So ultimately, everything's just kind of put on hold for a moment. It's just like this massive pause. And again, go back to Matthew 24:25. Immediately after the tribulation, those days the sun will be darkened, the moon will give off no light, and the stars fell from heaven. So everything, so God said, these angels are saying, wait, we got to mark the Jews, we got to mark the Gentiles. So they're marking the two witnesses to protect them from this event. And let's just then jump to chapter 8, verses 1 through 6. When he opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about a half hour. And I saw the seven angels who stand before God, and to them were given seven trumpets. Then another angel, having a golden censer, came and stood at the altar, and he was given much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all the saints upon the golden altar which was before the throne. And the smoke of the incense, with the prayers of the saints, ascended before the God and from the angels. Never doubt the power of your prayers, by the way. Then the angel took the censer, filled it with fire from the altar, and threw it to the earth, and there was noises, thunderings, lightnings, and an earthquake. And then we get into the prelude of the trumpets, and essentially if you jump to 8:10, then the third angel sounded, and a great star fell from heaven, burning like a torch, and it fell on the earth of the rivers and on the springs of the water. And the name of the star is Wormwood. And then jump to 12, the fourth angel sounded, and a third of the sun was struck, a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that the third of them were darkened. And a third of the day did not shine, and likewise the night. So what ultimately takes place here is, and we'll be reading way more detail into what's happening here, but if we go back to 6:12 through 17, what's taking place here is he breaks the sixth seal, and then all of a sudden there's this, what I believe is a meteor striking the earth. And we'll kind of get to that here in a little bit later, and we're going to dedicate our entire next episode to that. But then an angel says, now hold on a second, let's mark everybody, let's mark the saints. I believe that is when the rapture of the church occurs. This is the end of the tribulation. Then there's about a half hour of silence in heaven, and then God's wrath is unleashed on the earth. This is a very significant thing. But so how long will this go on? What is this kind of thing that's taking place here? Now, I just want to kind of say that this event is brought up a few times in the Bible, because you can't read the Bible like a story from beginning to end. It brings up the same event several times, so we can see it from different views and get a deeper understanding of what's taking place here. But if you jump back to Isaiah 13:1, Isaiah saw this exact same particular event in 13:1, the burden against Babylon, which Isaiah the son of Amoz saw. And then let's jump to 9 and 10. Behold, the day of the Lord comes, cruel with both wrath and fierce anger, to lay the land desolate, and he will destroy its sinners from it. For the stars of heaven and their constellations will not give their light. The sun will be darkened in its going forth, and the moon will not cause its light to shine. Now, this is a very significant event, because what's taking place here is, I believe, we are seeing the beginning of the destruction of Babylon, and this is very significant, because if we jump ahead to the destruction of Babylon, In Revelation 18:21, it says, "Then a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea, saying, Thus with violence the great city Babylon shall be thrown down and shall not be found anymore." Now ultimately what we're seeing here in Revelation 6, verse 12 through 17, is we're kind of getting this first glance of just a really significant disturbance on the earth from meteors. Now ultimately what happens scientifically if a meteor was to hit the earth is a fiery dust cloud would completely darken the earth, and it would send up, just like if you threw a rock into a puddle, it sends up drops of water splashing out all directions like that, except for fire and brimstone going up and then raining back down on the earth and completely covering the earth with a cloud for a significant amount of time. To where it's just completely dark, and that's the only way I can see it, just a cloud, just dust of completely rolling up the sun as if you're pulling a shade down, which is what they describe. And then we're going to dedicate next episode to focusing on how long does this happen, when does this take place, because I believe that Daniel 8:13 through 14 tells us exactly how long this takes place, or when it's going to begin, and then also it clearly says in Revelation how long this will take place as well. And both Daniel 8:13 and 14 agree with Revelation on the timeline as well. And it's very significant because what we're talking about is kind of the end of civilization as we know it, regardless of the wars and the tribulation and the famine that's taking place on the earth. You haven't seen nothing until, because those are all humans doing it. Now God and his spiritual warriors are allowing it to take place, but it's humans doing it. This is a different story. This is the wrath and the judgment of God raining down on earth, and that is why this is such a significant event, and it has to be talked about several times in Revelation. And we're definitely going to dedicate at least one more episode to this, specifically so we can get into, well, when does this meteor hit the earth, and then how long does this darkness and burning take place? Welcome to a series that we call The End of Times, where we're going through the book of Revelation verse by verse to do our best to understand what it is we can expect to happen in the end times, or the times Jesus referred to in Matthew 24 as the end of the age. And where we are at this point is we've gone through Revelation verse by verse, and John has been taken up in the Spirit to the throne room of God, where he sees that Jesus is only worthy to open a scroll that God has, and there's 7 seals, and he's opened all of the seals except for the 6th and 7th one, and that's kind of where we were at last episode. So let's just jump right in. Revelation 6:12. I looked when he opened the 6th seal, and behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became like blood. And the stars of heaven fell to the earth as a fig tree drops its late figs when it is shaken by a mighty wind. Then the sky receded as a scroll when it is rolled up, and every mountain and island was moved out of its place. And the kings of the earth, the great men, the rich men, the commanders, the mighty men, every slave, every free man, hid himself in the caves and in the rocks of the mountains, and said to the mountains and rocks, Fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of his wrath has come, and who is able to stand? Now what we're talking about is destruction so great that it blacks out the earth. And there's this is brought up several times in Revelation. It's brought up in Isaiah 13:10, Joel 12:01, Amos 8, Ezekiel 32, Matthew 24:29, Mark 13:24, and Acts 2:10. This is regularly brought up time and time again, this event where God's judgment on earth has officially arrived. And it means that the sky goes dark and burning sulfur falls down to the earth, and it's really just not a pretty sight for anybody on the earth. So we dedicated last episode to kind of understand what is that, and we're dedicating this episode to when can we expect that to happen. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by saying that, there's not a lot of timelines we can count on when it comes to Revelation. There's only a few. Matthew 24 shows us that we are in that season of the end of the age. But it is Daniel 12 that gives us this moment of the abomination of desolation where 3.5 years or 1,290 days of tribulation ends, and blessed is he who makes it to the 1,335th day. And we went over that particular timeline, and I'll just kind of remind you of it here. Here what you have is as soon as that abomination of desolation occurs, you have 1,290 days before the end of tribulation, and then an additional 45 days take you to the 1,335th day with Christ's return. So there's this kind of this space at the end, which is kind of where this happens. So how can we know when this is going to take place in this timeline? Well, I believe Daniel 8 makes it very clear when it is we can expect this to happen. So we're going to take this episode, we're going to go back to Daniel 8, because Daniel 8 is talking about the end times and what that looks like, and we're going to attach a date to this. So let's jump to Daniel 8, and we're going to start in verse 10. What's taking place here is Daniel has seen a vision of a goat and a ram, and it gets kind of complicated what he sees here. We're not going to get into that in this episode. We're just going to interpret that vision here. So we're going to pick it up in 10. And it grew up to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the hosts and some of the stars to the ground and trampled them. So we're talking about the Antichrist. He even exalted himself as high as the prince of hosts, and by him the daily sacrifices were taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. So we're talking about the abomination of desolation here now. So now we got a timeline we can work with. Because of transgression, an army was given over to the horn to oppose the daily sacrifices, and he cast truth down to the ground. So he's clearly just lying. Truth doesn't mean anything. He did all this and prospered, and he succeeded at it too. Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to that certain one who is speaking, how long will the vision be concerning the daily sacrifices? Now we're talking about the abomination. So a holy angelic being is asking this. And the transgression of desolation, the giving of both sanctuary and the host to be trampled underfoot. And he said to me, for 2,300 days, then the sanctuary shall be cleansed. And that's a very significant verse. But let's kind of keep going, and we'll come back to that one. Jump to 15. Now it happened when I, Daniel, had seen the vision and was seeking the meaning, that suddenly there stood before me one having the appearance of a man. And I heard a man's voice between the banks of the Ulai, which is a river he was having this vision on, who called and said, Gabriel, make this man understand the vision. So, this is great, because now we can understand it. We'll jump to 19. And he said, look, I am making known to you what shall happen in the latter time of the indignation, for at the appointed time the end shall be. So he's making it clear, as we're talking about the end times here. The ram which you saw, having the two horns, they are the kings of Media and Persia. And the male goat is a kingdom of Greece. The large horn that is between its eyes is the first king. So we're talking about Alexander the Great here. As for the broken horn and the four that stood up in his place, 4 kingdoms shall arise out of that nation, but not with its power. So we're talking about the 4 generals that then took over his territory after his death. 23. And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors have reached their fullness, now we're back to the end times, a king shall arise having fierce features, who understands sinister schemes. His power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. He shall destroy fearfully, and shall prosper and thrive. He shall destroy the mighty and also the holy people. Through his cunning he shall cause deceit to prosper under his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart. He shall destroy many in their prosperity. He shall even rise against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without human hand. And this is very important, 26. And the vision of the evenings and the mornings which was told is true. Therefore, seal up the vision, for it refers to many days in the future. So now let's go back to this timeline, because they did give us a timeline in Daniel 8, 13 and 14. How long will the vision be concerning the daily sacrifices and the transgression of desolation, the giving of both the sanctuary and the host to be trampled underfoot? And he said to me, for 2,300 days, then the sanctuary shall be cleansed. Now, this verse is greatly misinterpreted throughout all the scholars on the planet, because this 2,300 days doesn't fit anything on the timeline at all. As a matter of fact, it specifically says in a few chapters later that from the desolation, or the abomination of desolation, you have 1,290 days, and then blessed is he who makes it to the 1,335th day. So where's this 2,300 days fit? It doesn't fit. It doesn't fit anywhere, and that's because they're not looking at the true meaning of the Hebrew words. All the English translations are wrong with this one. At least I haven't seen one that's got it right. But if you look at the Hebrew words, what it says is it will take 2,300 Arab Boker, which means it'll take 2,300 mornings and evenings. And we know this to be true because those are the Hebrew words, but then it also says it in 26. And the vision of the evenings and the mornings which was told is true. Therefore seal up the vision, for it refers to many days in the future. So when people hear this 2,300 mornings and evenings, they immediately say, well, they're talking about days. We're talking about 2,300 days here. But that's not what they're talking about. What they're talking about is the daily sacrifices in the temple, because we're talking about the abomination and desolation of the temple. Every day since the beginning of the sacrifices in the sanctuary, and then the temple back with Moses, or the sanctuary with Moses, and then eventually the temple with Solomon, and then this rebuilt temple that we're dealing with now, every day starts with the sacrifice of a spotless lamb. Then all the other sacrifices can take place. That's referred to as the morning. And then every day ends with the sacrifice of a spotless, innocent lamb, and those are referred to as the evenings. So he says 2,300 mornings and evenings. So it's easy to say that one morning and one evening equals one day. I mean, we only get one morning and one evening every day. So 2,300 doesn't fit. This doesn't fit anywhere, because they're looking at it through the context of days. But there's 2 sacrifices per day. So the sacrifices, 2,300 mornings and evenings, is actually, that's 2 a day. We're talking 1,150 days. So from the abomination of desolation, the sacrifices stop for 1,150 days. Then there is no more mornings and evenings. And the only thing that determines the mornings and evenings is the sun. When the sun comes up, we know it's morning. When it goes down, we know it's evening. That's what determines the mornings and the evenings. So after 1,150 days, the sun stops rising. Is what this means. And a lot of Jewish scholars will interpret this the exact same way, but you'll never hear talk of this. People just say 2,300 days, but they can't explain what that means. But if you read it at 2,300 mornings and evenings, well, that's a whole different story. Now we're talking 1,150 days, and that's extremely significant. So now if we take a look at our timeline, we've added another line. So what we're looking at is you have the abomination of desolation. You have 1,290 days, and 1,335 days is when Christ returns. And then you have the witnesses who started 30 days after the abomination. They went for 1,260 days. But now we have this evening and morning sacrifices stopping for 1,150 days, starting with the abomination of desolation. And I believe it is on that 1,150th day that then the sun is blocked out. So that gives us a timeline on when we can expect Revelation 6:12 through 17 to happen, as well as, again, this event is brought up many other times throughout Revelation on when that can happen. And then it is on the 1,335th day that the clouds of heaven opens up, and of course then we see Christ's triumphant return. So we have this period of time where the sun is just blocked out. I do believe there's a period of time when those, because I think this happens before the rapture of the church occurs, but then the rapture of the church occurs somewhere in there as well. So I hope this helps. Again, it's greatly misinterpreted. I'm sure if you Google Revelation or Daniel 8 on what does this 2300 days mean, I'm sure everybody's going to say, they're going to try to give some hokey explanation of what that means, unless they say the true Hebrew words, which is 2300 mornings and evenings, and they're specifically talking about the sacrifices at the temple. I mean, that's what this whole entire chapter is about. Welcome to a series that we call The End of Times, where we're going through the book of Revelation verse by verse to try our best to understand what it is we can expect to happen in the end times, or the times Jesus referred to as the end of the age. And where we are at this point is John had been taken up into the Spirit, into the literal throne room of God, and we're able to look around, and he notices that God has a scroll, and it is only Jesus that can open those seals, and there's 7 of them, and we've opened the first 5, or we opened the first 6, and now we're getting to the point where what's about to happen is the wrath of God is about to be unleashed, and there's this pause in this wrath, or what God is about to do to the earth. And this particular episode, in my opinion, is one of the most fascinating ones we've done so far, because what this looks like is just incredible. So we're going to pick it up where we left off, and that's Revelation 7, verse 1. After these things, I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth, on the sea, or on any tree. Then I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God. And he cried with a loud voice to the 4 angels, to whom it was granted to harm the earth and the sea, saying, do not harm the earth, the sea, or the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God on their foreheads. And I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel were sealed. So what's going on here is ultimately you have the wrath of God about to be unleashed on the earth, and you have 4 angels holding back 4 winds of heaven, and then all of a sudden you have an angel ascending from heaven saying, wait, hold on, let's make sure that the chosen, the marked of God are marked before you release these winds. So I really kind of debated on what to start with in this particular group of verses, because you really have a lot going on here. What you have is, you have these 4 angels. Who are they? What are these 4 winds capable of? And then we also have this moment in time where somehow there's going to be a group of 144,000 Jews marked, and there's just this pause until that has taken place. So we're going to start with this pause, the marking, and we'll get into what the 4 winds are capable of next time, because that is incredibly fascinating. You can probably write a whole book on what the 4 winds are capable of. But we're going to talk about this moment in time because it's really fascinating. In Ezekiel 9, 1 through 11, he sees this moment, and he sees it in much more detail than John sees it. So we're going to jump into Ezekiel 9, 1 through 11. Then he called out in my hearing with a loud voice, saying, let those who have charge over the city draw near, each with a deadly weapon in his hand. And suddenly 6 men came from the direction of the upper gate, with faces north, each with a battle axe in his hand. And these are some pretty tough-sounding angels. One man among them was clothed in linen and had a writer's inkhorn at his side. They went in and stood beside the bronze altar. Now the glory of God of Israel had gone up from the cherub where it had been to the threshold of the temple, and he called to the man clothed with linen, who had the writer's inkhorn at his side. And the Lord said to him, go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and put a mark on the foreheads of the men who sigh and cry over all the abominations that have been done within it. So he's talking about the abomination of desolation within the temple. To the others he said in my hearing, go after him through the city and kill. Do not let your eyes spare, nor have any pity. So ultimately what you have here is this moment in time in Revelation where God's wrath is about to be unleashed, but there's this pause. And according to later in Revelation, according to John, up in heaven, it seemed like about 30 minutes it took this particular angel to mark 144,000 Jews before this wrath is completely unleashed. Now, understanding what these four winds and what these four angels are capable of is something that, we definitely have to spend another episode on. But, when there's this pause, as a Christian, I find it interesting to realize that there's a moment in time where God's wrath is not being unleashed on the earth. And we have to understand at this point in Revelation where we're at is most of, everything that has been done that's terrible has been man's doing. God has just allowed it to happen. What we're about to see is God's doing, and we have to realize that God is in charge. He's always in charge of all these things. And the question comes to mind, well, can any of this be stopped? So, I know we can't necessarily stop the evil of mankind, but can we stop the wrath of God? So we're going to take a look at Jeremiah 18, 1 through 10. The word which came to Jeremiah from the Lord, saying, Arise and go down to the potter's house, and there I will cause you to hear my words. Then I went down to the potter's house, and there he was, making something at the wheel. And the vessel that he made of clay was marred in the hand of the potter. So he made it again into another vessel, as it seemed good to the potter to make. Then the word of the Lord came to me, saying, O house of Israel, can I not do with you as this potter? Says the Lord. Look, as the clay is in the potter's hand, so are you in my hand, O house of Israel. The instant I speak concerning a nation or concerning a kingdom to pluck up, to pull down, and to destroy it, if that nation against whom I have spoken turns from its evil, I will relent of the disaster that I thought to bring upon it. And the instant I speak concerning a nation and concerning a kingdom to build and to plant it, if it does evil in my sight, so that it does not obey my voice, then I will relent concerning with the good with which I said would benefit it. Now therefore speak to the men of Judah and to the inhabitants of Jerusalem, saying, Thus says the Lord, Behold, I am fashioning a disaster and devising a plan against you. Return now, every one from his evil way, and make your ways and your doings good. All of God's wrath that he has, that we read about in Revelation, this is not ordained by God. But it can be stopped. The problem is, he lives outside of time. He's already experienced it. He's experiencing it right now. He already knows that we won't repent. As a nation, as a world, it's really kind of sad, but the bottom line is we could stop it, but we choose not to. So when we get into next time, the four winds of heaven and what those four angels are capable of, I think it's very important we understand that all of this can be stopped, and time in the Bible we see examples of that. But again, the problem is God's already seen it. He's experiencing it right now. We can stop it. We just choose not to. Hope this video helps. Definitely stay tuned next week, because, man, what those angels are capable of is fascinating. So if you have any comments, put them below. If you like this video, click like and subscribe. If you feel called to support our channel through Patreon, that link is also below. But the most important part of this channel is we take prayer requests, so never hesitate to send that in. Thank you for watching this episode of God, Family, and Guns. And as always, love God, love your family, and love guns.